This week has seen Belgium apologize to Congo, Burundi and Rwanda for colonization and kidnapping of mixed-race children. And the world's best teacher from Kenya, Peter Tabichi, meets President Donald Trump of the United States of America and addresses the United Nations Assembly. This is Africa Focus.
Almost 200 Nigerians repatriated from South Africa. The appeal trial of 24 men convicted over the beheadings of 2 young Scandinavians postponed. Cameroonians react to president's calls of national dialogue on separatist crisis.
I'm Lenny Rashid, and our sign language interpreter is Tracy Dorcas. Before we get into the main stories, let's take a look at the news that made the headlines around the continent this week.
In a country splintered by conflict and propaganda wars, Libya's journalists are caught in the crossfire between battlefronts and partisan employers, exposing them to risk on the ground. Fighting that erupted in early April when Eastern strongman Khalifa Haftar launched an offensive on the capital Tripoli has only worsened the cleavages in the country's spread fragmented mediascape. The battle pits the forces of Tripoli's UN-recognized Government of National Accord (GNA) against fighters loyal to Haftar, who backs a parallel administration in eastern Libya. The rival sides each run their own news agencies and official television channels, and Libya's private media outlets have dug in too, taking sides and thereby exposing their journalists to potential reprisals. Threats and attacks since the 2011 ouster of long-term leader Muammar Gaddafi have prompted several private television networks established by businessmen and politicians in the years immediately after his fallout to pull out and transit from abroad. Some new outlets have followed suit, broadcasting politically charged content from overseas.
The Trans-Gabonese Railway, the backbone of Gabon's economy, is awaiting reconstruction. The Bongo train, as it is affectionately known, remains the country's sole railway line, linking 23 stations from the coastal capital Libreville to distant Franceville, the country's third most populous city. The sky turns from indigo to ebony as the tropical night falls, and the train patiently thrusts through the jungle towards its destination, still hundreds of kilometers away. The trek has the hallmarks of one of the world's greatest forgotten train journeys, a voyage through 648 kilometers of lush equatorial forest. The train is the brainchild of Gabon's former president, Omar Bongo, who ruled for 42 years until his death in 2009. In the 1970s, he dreamed of linking the Central African state's resource-rich interior to the Atlantic coast, and he saw it through, despite being rebuffed by the World Bank, which refused to fund it on the grounds that it was not economically viable.
Kenya has become the third country to start routinely inoculating infants against malaria using the world's first vaccine to combat a disease that kills 800 children globally every day. The vaccine targets the deadliest and most common form of malaria parasite in Africa, where children under 5 account for 2/3 of all global deaths from the mosquito-borne illnesses. The vaccine targets the deadliest and most common form of malaria parasite in Africa, where children under 5 account for 2/3 of all global deaths from the mosquito-borne illness. Kenya joins Malawi and Ghana, which commenced their own pilot programs for the vaccine, supported by the World Health Organization earlier this year. The vaccine will be introduced in phases across malaria-endemic parts of western Kenya near Lake Victoria, starting with Homa Bay. Close to 120,000 children in the country are expected to be vaccinated under the pilot program.
Cameroon's president announced that he intends to hold a major national dialogue in a bid to put an end to the conflict between security forces and armed separatists from the Anglophone majority in the west of Cameroon.
Biya, who has been in power for 37 years, reiterated his offer of pardon to any separatists who voluntarily lay down their arms, while vowing that those who refuse to do so will face the full force of the law, as well as the country's security and defense forces. He said that the talks in late September would be presided over by the Prime Minister Joseph Dion Ngute and will bring together the representatives of numerous factions, including security officers and the armed separatists. Dion Ngute would hold broad consultations, including delegation who would meet the diaspora in the coming days, the president said, without saying where a potential summit would be held.
I
think that today is important that those who are in the bush to stop the dialogue, that they can lay down their arms in order to come to the dialogue. The important thing is that the actors of the Anglophone crisis, those who have taken up the street in the Anglophone crisis, those who are holding the crisis really come to dialogue.
Anger at perceived discriminations by Francophones against Anglophones, injustice, education and the economy built for years. The current crisis began in late 2016 and escalated a year later when English-speaking militants symbolically declared the creation of the independent Republic of Amazonia in the two regions. The government responded with a brutal crackdown, and the separatists in turn have mounted a campaign of attacks on state buildings, including schools, as well as shooting and kidnappings. In a bid to foster reconciliation in December last year, Biya ordered the release of 289 people arrested in connection with the crisis. However, in August, Julius Ayuk Tabe, the leader of the separatists and self-proclaimed president of Amazonia, was sentenced to life in prison along with none of his supporters. The conviction was seen by many as a blow to potential talks between the two sides.
Free people who are in jail to talk about dialogue. When people are in prison, doesn't say anything good. The national dialogue. Who is he going to talk to? What can we say now?
Long before his conviction, Ayuk Tabe said he was open to dialogue, asking for the release of himself and other English-speaking prisoners. He has also called for the army to withdraw from the Anglophones region, which is off the table for the Yandu.
The appeal trial of 24 men convicted over the beheadings of two young Scandinavian women on a hiking trip in Morocco's High Atlas Mountains last December resumed in Morocco's Saleh.
The appeal at the court in Sale near Rabat comes 6 weeks after 3 Islamic State group supporters were sentenced to death over the murders which have shocked the North African country. Alleged ringleader Abdesamad Ejud, a 25-year-old street vendor and underground imam, has confessed to orchestrating the attack with 2 other radicalized Moroccans. Younes Oziad, a 27-year-old carpenter, admitted to beheading one of the tourists, and Rachid Afati, 33, admitted to filming the grisly murders on his mobile phone. The other defendants, including the only non-Moroccan Spanish-Swiss Muslim convert Kevin Zola Guervos, were handed jail terms ranging from 5 years to life. The accused were transported to court in high security for their appeal.
This is the second hearing before the appeal court, and it's a procedural one. We made the same request that we did during the trial stage. The court did not dismiss the request, but asked to study them.
While those convicted are seeking lighter punishments, the family of 24-year-old Danish student Louisa Jespersen are urging the court to uphold the July 18 sentences. Jespersen and her hiking companion, 28-year-old Norwegian Maren Newland, nature lovers who were training to be guides, were on a Christmas holiday hiking trip when they were killed. Their lives were cut short in the foothills of Toubkal, the highest summit in North Africa, some 80 kilometers from the city of Marrakesh, a tourist magnet. Prosecutors and social media users had called for the death penalty for all 3 main suspects, despite Morocco having a de facto freeze on execution since 1993.
The file has been pushed till next week to speed the process of finding a solution for this issue, and we thank the court for that because it is an important and essential point. Therefore, the next hearing will be devoted to listening to the accused.
The defense team of those convicted has argued there were mitigating circumstances on account of their precarious social conditions. Coming from modest backgrounds with a very low level of education, the defendants mostly lived in low-income areas of Marrakesh.
Guervos, the Spanish-Swiss defendant, was accused of having taught the main suspects how to use an encrypted messaging service and to use weapons. He was sentenced last month.
Families of the ill-fated Ethiopian Airlines held an emotional vigil outside the Department of Transportation to mourn relatives 6 months after the plane crashed into a farmland outside the capital, Addis Ababa.
Ethiopian Airlines families gathered to mourn loved ones 6 months after crash. Holding photos of those they lost in the crash, they spoke with grief of the challenge of moving on without their loved ones. Paul Njoroge lost his 3 children, his wife and mother-in-law in the crash.
While all your lives moved on for the last 6 months, our lives, the lives of the families of the victims, my life has not moved an inch. You've gone on with your lives, with your daily activities. I'm not able to go on with my life. I don't know how to live this life anymore.
Relatives of some victims of Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302 met with the U.S. Transportation Secretary Elaine Chao for about 2 hours. Njoroge said Chao assured him and other family members that the 737 MAX would not fly again until she was convinced it was safe.
I want them to think about the emptiness in my life today. Because I trusted the FAA and I trusted Boeing. When I booked the flights for my wife and my children and my mom-in-law, I trusted that all the procedures, all the internal validation processes within Boeing and the FAA are in order. And that's what you all believe when you're flying. When you book a flight, you do believe that you're gonna get to your destination safely. There wasn't a moment that I imagined that I would be here today. There wasn't a moment that I imagined that my life would be turned upside down. That I would be wondering about the future. Because all my future is gone. My future was my wife and my children. I lived for them.
The head of Ethiopia Police said the identification of human remains from the crash was complete. The U.S. Congress is preparing to call Boeing executive to testify on the 2 fatal Boeing 737 MAX crashes that led the plane grounding in March. The airplane slammed into the ground with such force that only fragments of those who died could be recovered.
And this day is to remember those we lost. To remember Sammy, my daughter, remember Paul's family. That's the primary purpose of this day. But we as families are gathered and we're in communication increasingly together for several reasons. Number one, we heal better by talking to each other. Number two, we want to prevent a third crash.
Families had the news that identification had been completed through the media. Collecting and identifying the remains has been a fraught process. Families of those who perished complained of lack of information about the recovery effort, during which Ethiopian workers used metal aircraft parts to dig in the soil.
Danielle is our rock. She's only 24 years old, and she was one of the UN delegates who's going to go to Nairobi, Kenya. She's there to save the world, yet the world failed her because of people's greed, of the corporate's greed. We got robbed. It is not fair for us not to have answer and not to receive their bodies or their remains.
Relatives of the crash victims found bones at the site as recently as July. Many relatives are pressing for the farmland where the plane crashed about 60 kilometers east of the capital to be turned into a permanent memorial.
A truly sad event indeed. Coming up after the break.
Benin bulldozes district, leaving residents homeless.
We're taking a short break. We'll be right back. Don't touch that dial. Keep it switch. Welcome back to Africa Focus. The LAMU archipelago in northeastern Kenya is known for its long unspoilt beaches, coral-rich waters and rich marine life with 5 species of endangered turtles. But the residents fear that a coal-fired power plant project that will threaten the ecosystem and affect tourism.
Every day, Thabit and Ali go fishing. They both come from families who have relied on the sea for generations. It is their livelihood. But they are concerned about the future, now that their archipelago is threatened by a coal-fired power plant project.
The disaster is going to come from that coal plant, is going to reach up to Nairobi. So just imagine about the LAMU people, you know. So many people will believe they're going to have problem with their health, like cancer disease, you know.
In June, those objecting to the development won a huge victory. The National Environmental Court had ordered to stop the controversial project.
We didn't think it would happen. We saw that the government is very fair. We're very happy.
But it's not a done deal. An appeal to proceed with constructing the power plant can still be made, and the Kenyan government can override any final decisions. The coal-fired power plant is part of a much larger development project that includes the construction of a port, roads and pipelines to develop the northeastern part of the country. Residents are concerned such developments will disrupt the delicate ecosystem, as well as contribute to a decrease in tourism, which is still fragile after an Englishwoman was kidnapped and her husband murdered in 2011.
Tourists, most of them, they won't come LAMU as they used to come, will be like few years back.
The LAMU archipelago is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, renowned for its Swahili architecture, beautiful beaches and mangroves. Following the initial decision in June barring any construction, developers were ordered by the court to carry out a fresh environmental impact assessment, the results of which are still pending.
In an effort to clean up the city of Cotonou, the Beninese authorities are freeing up public spaces illegally occupied by the population. Several homes were destroyed and hundreds of families have become homeless.
The people watched in horror as the bulldozers moved in. Soon, the mere dwellings were reduced to rubble, becoming homes only to stray dogs that nosed through their belongings. The demolition of Holakoji, a district in Benin's economic capital Cotonou, was carried out in the name of urban development, a keystone issue for President Patrice Talon.
We don't know their project. We are usually told we are going to build big buildings, big hotels on the shores of the lagoon, on the shores of the sea, and nothing has been done since 2012. Maybe this government is a very strong government. Maybe it has a plan and it is up to it to inform us.
But local people say their homes were swept away in a maelstrom of indifference, leaving them without a roof over their heads, a calamity that commentators say raises stark questions about Talon's signature policy. Holakoji is traditionally a fishing district where people settled generations ago but never acquired legal title to the land. In recent years, it has gradually acquired a bad reputation. The authorities, in an attempt to clean up the district, bulldozed about 120 homes, according to locals, and now many residents are sleeping outside at the edge of the Atlantic.
Because of the destruction of our homes, we have nowhere to sleep. My children, grandchildren and I are sleeping in the nearby school. My belongings are lost and I would like the state to find a solution.
Colette, a local government representative of Holakoji, is angry at the government. Like many locals, she's still in shock. Her father was once a homeowner, but now is homeless.
Our ancestors, the first occupiers of this land, whether here by the sea or in the bush, did not buy it. Why, when it comes to the Hola people who live by the sea, are they said to be on public property?
In 2012, the former government began evicting people from the area.
people left helpless, the Benin Federation of Slum Informal Settlement Residents, an organization fighting for urban development in West Africa, condemned the government's lack of resettlement solutions and advanced eviction notifications. Since his election in April 2016, Talon, a hard-nosed, successful businessman, has vowed to transform urban and housing development across the country. But critics say that oversight of how these plans are executed is lacking, and the key issue of relocation is often neglected.
If you have to dislodge an entire community, which includes nearly 100 families, then you have to think about the relocation plan. Right now, what we are seeing here is that the government has not yet come forward. We do not know if the people who have been displaced will be relocated.
Without redevelopment plans, residents whose illegal homes have been bulldozed often return to rebuild their old neighborhoods, as was seen in Holokoji after the 2012 evictions. The Wa people have lived in the district for more than a century and were among the first inhabitants of Cotonou, which now has a population of around 1.2 million.
For decades, a factory churning out visual pulp fiction destined for the market stalls of DVD pirates Nollywood is increasingly grabbing the attention and financing of global entertainment brands.
Action. Nigeria's film industry draws global entertainment brands. It's another day in Nollywood, the affectionate nickname for Nigeria's film industry, the world's second most prolific after India, which produces hundreds of film and TV episodes each month. Some, like French group Vivendi's Canal, seek to harness Nigerians' hustle and know how to extend the lifespan of the traditional pay TV model, which is bleeding customers in developed markets but still has a future in Africa. Others, including South Africa's MultiChoice, are using Nigeria as a testing ground for introducing streaming platforms in African markets with poor communication infrastructure and low income levels. In both cases, it's the local productions that's benefiting.
10 years ago, Nollywood was different, like very different. I started as an actor. I was a child actor, and trust me, it was not like this. Today we shoot with better cameras, we record audio separate from the pictures, we do things just differently. So in 10 years' time, yeah, the industry will be really, really different, and we're really growing very fast.
Canal Plus first dipped its toe in Nigeria 6 years ago, buying up local films, dubbing them and airing them on a dedicated channel, Nollywood TV, to viewers in French-speaking Africa. Its success led to the creation of a second channel. The deal with ROK secures a steady supply of new films and series as the company eyes a further expansion of African content. Since it was founded 6 years ago, ROK has produced over 540 films and 25 series. Under the Canal Plus deal, it aims to increase production from the next year, around 300 films and 20 series annually.
This is the first time you get people from big companies like Canal Plus saying, you guys are doing something awesome. You guys are doing something valuable, something we need. This is the first time the world is really seeing, as in seeing what Nollywood has done, like how far Nollywood has come. This is like a successful export of Nollywood content.
Low on production quality but high on entertainment value, they quickly garnered a fanatical following across Africa and its diaspora, and in 2003, MultiChoice launched Africa Magic, a Nollywood channel that would grow into a subscription package on its DSTV satellite network. The boom in interest in Nigeria's film industry can only be a good thing for Nollywood, says Joshua Richard, who is playing a fanatically religious student on What Are Friends For?
You can see that a lot of Nigerian artists, actors are working with people outside the country, and you see that a lot of actors outside the country want to come here and work with us and like experience our culture, like, oh, Africa, this, that, you know, and put it in their movies. You know, we have like major big companies that are doing that. I mean, look at the Marvel franchise, you know, with the whole Black Panther thing and everything.
We will start doing something like a cross-pollination of talent, doing co-productions, Yeah, we're working on co-productions with South Africans, co-production with Zambians. Like, they see Nollywood, they see our culture, they love it, right? But we don't see them.
To properly develop African markets, however, Canal Plus must cater to their diverse audiences. Francophone Africa has no Nollywood equivalent. Producing shows there has been slow and expensive. So Canal Plus hopes it can use ROK to clone the Nollywood model.
On Africa Focus, we love hearing from you, so make sure you get interactive with us on our various social media pages. Remember, you can view this program along with our wide array of other programs on DSTV channel 268, on Azam TV channel 138, and on Zuku channel 53. On behalf of the entire team here on Africa Focus, thank you for keeping us company on this exciting journey across the continent. Do enjoy the rest of your viewing. Keep it switched.